We'll get started here in just a second.
Good afternoon, everybody on the webinar here for connectivity. Welcome. My name is Kayla Savage. I'm the Community Development Division Director here at the Kansas Department of Commerce. And I'm glad to have you all with us for our first webinar for the connectivity grants that were funded by the SPARK Task Force. And the star of the show today is Mr. Stanley Adams, Director of the Office of Broadband Development for the Kansas Department of Commerce. And he is going to walk us through the details of the grant for both connectivity, physical assets, and then also the broadband partnership adoption grant as well. So there's two different grants that we'll be talking about today. He will share all the details with you as we go through, and there will be a time for questions and answers at the end. Hopefully all of you have had a chance to review the applications that are on our website now at kansascommerce.gov/COVID relief. And I believe Jim is putting that in the chat for us right now. All of your questions that you have, you can actually submit those through the chat as well. We'll be collecting those and answering those at the end as we can. And then otherwise, we will get you answers to those questions and post those on our website. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Stanley Adams, the Director of the Office of Broadband Development.
Thank you, Kayla. Good afternoon, everyone. I am excited to be here talking about broadband connectivity and funding opportunity that we have that has been made available for us to push out. So what I will do, as Kayla mentioned, I will provide you with a briefly, actually, let me share my screen. I think that might help. Hang on, just let me do the one little technical thing that I do know how to do, I think. Check. And I think that start sharing. All right, if somebody could confirm that they can see the screen so I don't keep trying to technical troubleshoot something that doesn't need troubleshooting.
We can see it, Stan. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, so let's on with the show. What I'd like to do is, here's the agenda for us. I'm going to give you a brief introductory comments. You know who I am. I have been with the Commerce Department for the better part of a decade, which time flies. And what I'll do is provide a little bit of background on the SPARK priorities and tell you what that is and how we got to the place where we have, we are discussing $60 million in funding opportunity available specifically for broadband. Those are the two programs you see listed on the agenda, and I'll walk you through a little bit of the details around what we have come up with. And then I will take questions. As Kayla mentioned, please, we've got quite a few folks on the webinar, so please do, if you have questions, put them in the chat. and I will try to answer as many as I can at the end of the overview that I provide you. And if there are questions that you have that I can't answer, even if I do have time, I will get answers and put them up on our frequently asked questions list afterwards. Okay, so with that, so let me give you the background on where we're at. So the Spark Task Force is Strengthening People and Revitalizing Kansas task force that was created by the governor and legislature in light of the pandemic. The Congress, through the CARES Act, had made funding available to each of the states to make investments in an immediate manner to mitigate the impacts of the pandemic. And in our case, the Spark Committee, in their very first meeting, they broke up into groups, one for education, one for healthcare, one for economic development. And at the end of their first meeting, each of those groups came back, and amongst their recommendations was to place an emphasis and priority on connectivity, because they recognize that the importance of connectivity cuts across all of these sectors. So what they did is the process evolved through several iterations and several other committees, including a working group that I participated in, to come up with recommended funding opportunity that we could do for broadband specifically. And the priorities you see here are our marching orders. These are the things that were prioritized in developing the programs that I'm going to talk to you about. They were to increase access to telehealth and telemedicine, increasing access to rural and underserved areas, as well as for continuous and distance learning, and a priority to generally make affordable quality broadband available for every Kansan. And they also stressed, they also placed a priority on 5G investments and other advanced technologies that might make sense for us. And that really goes to another mandate that we have, which is to focus on immediate impact, long-term benefit. And I'll touch more on that as I walk you through the grant programs that we've developed. The first program is $50 million. We called it the Connectivity Emergency Response Grant. It was created to address the increased need for connectivity in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I say that because that's really going to be key. Everything that goes through this fund does have to be linked to the pandemic in some manner. There's just no question about that. That's concrete. The proposed projects should improve connectivity in unserved and underserved areas, parts of our state, particularly with needs addressing telehealth, distance learning, and other remote businesses. As I mentioned, it's $50 million is the amount. The targeted impacts for this grant program are going to be for households lacking inadequate access to connectivity infrastructure, as well as for community anchor institutions lacking adequate access. Community anchor institutions includes schools and healthcare facilities, hospitals, and so on. Those schools obviously related to the very thing I mentioned above: telework, telehealth, distance learning. The application, as Kayla I think mentioned, is available for you to review now, and I know that many of you have. We have worked really diligently to make this a streamlined process. We will start taking applications next Wednesday at noon, and for this grant program, the window will close at 2 o'clock on Thursday, the 27th of August. And then our game plan is to award decisions on September 15th. Let me pause here and just make one point that's just underlying everything I'm talking about on these programs. We are moving really, really, really fast because everything is going fast. The idea for these programs is to make immediate impact in a very difficult situation, which is the pandemic. So we have had to kind of go from 0 to 100 in no time flat. And we are making every effort pretty much around the clock to stand this program up and make it as flawlessly executed as we can. If there are things that come up, like I said, if you have questions, if I can't answer them now, I will answer them subsequently. but just want to point out, we're doing everything on a very tight timing. When it comes to infrastructure in particular, these are by inherently projects that we expect take a lot longer in a lot of cases. So what we're doing is we're asking for this opportunity to, if there are where there are projects that can be executed by the end of the year, we want to do everything we can to make that happen. So the maximum award will not exceed $10 million under this grant program. We will, and then when you, as you look at the application, which is online, you will see that there's a description, calls for a description of the proposed project, things that you would expect to see in the application, the location, what kind of infrastructure is it, what specific improvements are you making, how many premises are going to be connected, are there going to be community anchor institutions connected or not. My recommendation, we don't require it in the application, but I do recommend you take advantage of the upload an executive summary and provide full context for what it is you're asking to be funded for, and keeping in mind what the goals and objectives of our grant are. How does the project address the increased need for internet activity in response to the COVID-19 pandemic? I can probably say that 3 more times just to make sure you heard me, but I won't. Eligibility requirements. So internet service providers and local communities, cities, counties, for-profit, not-for-profit, the program is set up to make it more broadly available for applicants. The punchline is, as you see here, applicants must demonstrate a need for connectivity in the proposed project area. And they also must demonstrate the ability to carry it out in a timely manner, which is to say by December 30. And that includes their technical and financial capability. Projects have to serve geographies lacking terrestrial-based, minimally adequate internet connectivity. In the case of residential, we're talking about 25.3 or 25 megabits per second down and 3 megabits per second up. And we will use as a starting point the FCC Form 477. This is important to understand. What we will do is if it's indicated on the Form 477, an area is unserved with 25.3, we will automatically consider that unserved and therefore eligible. If, however, on the Form 477, areas are indicated as being served, but you know that not to be the case as an applicant, we will accept supporting documentation to make that case. And if you can provide support to make that case, we will put that in into the mix. So it's our way of dealing with, obviously we need to be in a hurry, we're in a hurry to make this work, to get this going as quickly as possible. And we also don't want to get hung up in the whether or not Form 477 is accurate or not. Those of you in the service provider community are well aware of the nuances involved in this data set. So the point is, if there's a community, there's an area that you're wanting to propose that data set says is served, and you can show us that it's not, we're okay. You should put that in your application. And similarly, for community anchor institutions, for example, health facilities who are trying to deploy telehealth and telemedicine applications to households, whether it's for the household or in the facility, if it's needed for deploying telehealth services, for example, you just need to demonstrate that you currently don't have it, and what you're proposing needs to address a need in that regard. So we try to make this flexible, but obviously it needs to be demonstrated so we can look at it and understand what you're what you're proposing to do with the funding. So in terms of evaluating the application, the projects, here are some factors that we are going to be looking at. And these are, for the most part, I don't think will be a surprise. Obviously, I said the demonstrated need is really key and linkage to COVID-19. When it comes to connectivity, we do not think this will be a heavy lift in terms of demonstrating under the circumstances. Detail and clarity of the proposal, including a budget plan for what you're proposing. Detail and clarity of proposal is important. We must be able to read it and understand what you're saying. Project readiness and feasibility we will be looking at. We are consulting with a consulting firm for technical evaluation, the technical side of this, to make sure that what you're proposing is conceivably can conceivably be done by December 30 of this year. In all respects, it must be in compliance with CARES Act requirements. We also are very much looking for broad community support in your application. This could be the mayor, the county commissioner, the city council, the school district, would be any and all of those letters of support. We are looking to make sure that what's being proposed is being supported by that community where you're proposing to make investment. We also are looking at quality of speeds, and that is include download, upload, as well as latency. What our expectation is, these projects will be proposing more robust speeds rather than minimally adequate speeds. We will be looking at scalability and or symmetrical technology because, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking for immediate impact and long-term benefit. The technical evaluation I referred to, the design, feasibility, and plan of the proposed project, we will be taking a technical, each of the applications will go through a technical review. And then also there is a matching funds requirement. The matching fund requirement is 20% of the total project. And you see here, we also set it up for up to half of the matching contribution may be in kind rather than cash, but 50% of it does need to be in cash. And that can come from the community, that can come from the service provider. We don't, what it can't come from, I believe, and I need to double check, but where it can't come from is other federal grant funds. But I think that's one of the questions I'm gonna post on the FAQs later. So that in essence is the overview of the grant, the infrastructure grant component, and the application, as I mentioned, is available already, as is the application for the Broadband Partnership Adoption Grant. What this is, well, we're streamlining the process. Applications similar to the other grant program will be available on applications. We will accept applications beginning next Wednesday at noon. And then different from the other program, award decisions will be made on a rolling basis. You'll need to provide a description of the proposed project, including the process for determining that you're using for low income eligibility, number of households projected to benefit, what your outreach plan is to get to these folks. Again, as I mentioned, an executive summary to provide full context for how you're going to mitigate, how you will make available service for low income households that currently do not have it. The question is, how does this project address the increased need for internet connectivity in the response to the pandemic? As I said, that should not be a heavy lift in the context that we're operating in. The overview of the project. This program was intended to provide support for low-income households by partnering with service providers and or school districts to assure connectivity for remote learning, remote work, and accessing telehealth, telemedicine services, as I mentioned. Applicants may submit proposals for program support and specify how the funds will mitigate the adverse impacts. You should specify to what extent the applicant will match 2020 subscriber fee support in 2021. We're going to be able to, and the amount that we have available is $10 million. What we're saying in this application program, we can provide funding for low-income support through the end of this year, December 30. What we're looking for service providers are to step up and support us to how to make these dollars go further by carrying into the next year. We aren't requiring it, but we will evaluate based on the robustness of the proposal. The target $10 million is the amount that we have available. Low-income households, obviously, as I mentioned, are the target for these impacts where you lack connectivity. Similarly, for community anchor institutions, hence the school districts we think will play an important role. So we are very excited to be able to make that work. So in terms of eligibility, I mentioned school districts and/or service providers that are capable of immediately determining low-income household eligibility for the program through a recognized means, such as SNAP or the school lunch, national school lunch qualifications. If you get the app, you need to be able to demonstrate the ability to make this work really quickly. We initially had said you had to have an existing program for low-income internet access. We've loosened that to say that you need to be able to demonstrate that you can make the impact in quick timing. Again, obviously, our ability to provide funding ends December 30. The proposed service offering should include access to at least 25.3, which is the definition of minimally adequate broadband service. However, in this circumstance, in the pandemic, and the spirit of we think that the funding is set for, we will give consideration in cases where 10.1, for example, is the maximum available in a given area. So if 10.1 is the best that anyone in an area can get, this can qualify under this program. What won't qualify is 10.1 for someone, but other non-low income households can get faster speeds. We want this to be providing as a robust service offering as possible. And I already mentioned the challenging deadline of December 30, and that is explicitly per the CARES Act requirements. So we're really optimistic about the opportunity. The awards on this program, the awards will be based on how many people you can support, and it is subject to funding. We are going to fund as many as we can, and it's possible we would be oversubscribed, which means that we may make partial funding available if we can't do the full application. It's gonna be a depending subject to funding availability is what that means. Applicants will be notified of the grant award or denial within 5 business days of completing your application. I mentioned this would be on a rolling basis. Our goal is to try to turn it around in 5 days. And there will be a formal grant agreement on both of these grant programs prior to any funding being awarded. So that is, in short order, an overview of the 2 grant programs. And I will open it up for questions in the chat here. What I think you can put questions in the chat room now. You can also submit questions to us at backtobusiness@ks.gov or kdc_broadband@ks.gov. And I will be happy to take a look. Let's have a look and see what questions you have.
Hey, Stan, would you like me to go ahead and review the questions on the chat?
Oh, yes, if you could help with that, that would be great.
Great, I just got to get closer to where I can actually read them on the screen. All right, so first question we have coming from, let's see here. We're going to scroll up. First question. All right. So first question, my question is, if our library has received funding from the CARES Act through Humanities Kansas for salary, can I still apply for net neutrality broadband access through here? So that's the first question. It looks like Nicole has a couple questions. So it looks like Humanities Kansas CARES Act was used for salary for their library. And she's asking if they could apply for broadband access through this program.
I'd better take that one and get back to you. I don't know. I'm not sure I completely understand what that situation would be, but happy to take a look and provide an answer.
Yeah. So in some of our experience with some of the other CARES Act funding, as long as it's not, you're not duplicating the same dollar, then you should be eligible to go ahead and apply for the separate use of funding. But we will double check on that too, because like Stan said, it's we need to double check that that's not double dipping. Let's see here. You go back up, Jim. Oh, the highlight. Okay. How do telehealth providers frame the application? We rely on the connectivity provided by others, which in turn determines where we can deliver our telehealth capability.
Kayla, there was some noise on my end. I apologize. I couldn't hear everything you said.
Okay. How do telehealth providers frame the application? We rely on the connectivity provided by others, which in turn determines where we can deliver our telehealth capability.
Right. So that's a little bit of a challenge, right? Because you've got to be able to show that there's a connectivity problem, and it needs to be, we have to have a way to determine that there's a problem, there's a connectivity issue that you're solving. That might be a case of you working with your service provider and having them explain what the nature of their connectivity problem. That might be a partnering opportunity, or you might need to consider looking at other potential solutions. I'm not able to say what the solutions are, obviously from our vantage point, but that is what we did is we made it so that if there is such a situation that you can show, we want to be able to do it.
So definitely partner with the provider then.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, next question from Dan. Can one entity submit more than one application if the entity is interested in addressing more than one proposed funded service area?
Absolutely. You can definitely you can apply, make multiple applications for multiple communities. We don't have a limit on that, and we encourage you to do so.
Okay. Gregory, is use of wireless broadband technology acceptable?
Yes, it is. We are not putting on, there are no restrictions on the type of technology. What you have to keep in mind is what we're looking for are solutions that are that can demonstrate scalability and long-term benefit. So I think there are some. So for example, if you had an application that proposed building out a 25/3 network to some premises, the first thing is that's going to be less competitive than someone that's proposing to build out the same scenario with two-way gigabit with fiber to the home, for example, right? So what you're going to want to do to be competitive is offer up more robust type of capability so that we can meet the criteria of long-term benefit and being quickly deployed. We're aware that one of the more quickly deployed technologies would be fixed wireless. And I know, excuse me, and I know that there are a range of solutions that can come out of fixed wireless. The emphasis would be on the higher end variety, as I understand it anyway. So but again, just looking at the speeds, latency, and scalability.
All right, another question. Can the city ensure or arrange access to existing street poles?
Can the city arrange? It sounds like a permitting question, but I'm not quite sure how to answer that one.
Okay.
Could you, if you want, submit it, maybe provide a little bit more detail, you can send it to us via email and we'll answer that.
So that question came from Gregory Engelbrecht, and he's got one more question here, Stan. Do you have maps of underserved areas and anchor facilities?
No, we are not. We're specifically not trying to say that we have the map that shows where you can apply. This is a very fast turnaround. We are counting on the private sector to come up with the answers here and to be innovative and develop and identify and develop solutions that will work under the circumstances.
Okay. Can you elaborate on the definition of in-kind contribution?
Well, we will elaborate in our guidance. We will publish more information on that because I know there are a couple of exceptions, but we'll publish that.
Okay, the application states attach a preliminary technical evaluation of the project certified by a professional engineer. Does an engineer on the staff at an ISP submitting the application qualify?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Easy one. All right.
I know, I appreciate that.
Okay, and from Joel, why matching funds?
Well, that could be as much as a why not too. So what we did was we tried to come up with an approach that was going to be fair and reasonable. We recognize there are challenges from a funding standpoint, and we looked at that question. Do you and what we're trying to accomplish here is making a requirement that is not too onerous, but also demonstrate that there's skin in the game on the community side. And when I say the community side, from a practical standpoint, I'm really thinking from the service provider or the builder of the building applicant.
And the 50% in-kind match also gives an opportunity for the community to get involved as well.
Right.
Match. So, all right, 2 questions here from Tina. Is equipment to improve connectivity allowed?
Yes, the improvement needs to be in a way that it gets from below minimally adequate to above minimally adequate.
All right, is reimbursement for costs already accrued allowed?
That's a really good question. I want to take that one and make sure we answer it correctly.
Okay. All right, and Dan has asked, is a PE certification required as part of the application?
No, not explicitly. What we need is credible applications. We need to have someone who knows that you need to be demonstrating that it is technically feasible. So, and I'm not a PE, so I don't even I can't go deep on that question, other than to say that what we're saying to you as prospective applicants is whoever is attesting that this is feasible and that you can get it done by the December 30 deadline, for example, that needs to be someone who we can recognize knows what they're talking about. You don't necessarily have to be a PE, but that's the direction that we will be looking for.
Stan, there's a question here related to the broadband adoption, the partnership adoption plan or grant, asking about TANF, if TANF recipients would also be an eligible population. I believe that would be correct, but let's take that and look at how that compares for SNAP and the school lunch program.
That makes sense.
We can get back to you on
Probably,
that.
yes, but we'll find out.
We'll get back to you on that one. Okay, Michael asked, can these funds be used in Kansas areas that are also applying for RDOF support?
So good question. Believe the answer is, and the RDOF has not been awarded yet. So if an area hasn't been awarded, you're eligible. What you may do is, if I understand the RDOF correctly, if you can qualify for this funding opportunity, it's probably more attractive. The way I understand the way the rules work, because we're funding right now RDOF funds over a period of time. But I believe that's the way to think about it.
Right, and Greg asked the question, what does the term terrestrial mean?
Wired.
Okay, all right.
Not wireless.
We have an area of the county with very poor internet, but affluent population. Might this be eligible?
It would not. That's a good question. Technically, I don't think there's a problem with that. If you've got an area that's demonstrating that it doesn't have access, and you can show, we tried to make the rules, if you can show that they're adversely impacted by the pandemic, that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying, this is not a program that looks at how affluent, or the $50 million grant program does not look at how affluent premises are or are not. That's not what the program is.
Related though, there is a question on the application about if the proposed project area is in an economically distressed area though. So there is a question related that way, so that folks know that. Christy asked if we submitted our questions via email prior to the webinar, will those be addressed or should I put them in the chat? Christy, if you submitted your questions either to the back to business email at Commerce, those will actually be forwarded to Stan, and so he will either directly respond to you or we will capture those also for the frequently asked questions page, just so to answer that one. All right, Austin says holding companies, do they need to file one application or can each locally managed affiliate apply independently?
The way to think about that is we need individual applications showing the impact in that community. It's not a problem that a holding company has multiple applications, but the applications need to be, you're going to want to show the investment in a specific area and a specific mitigation of the pandemic, and a specific community support.
Okay. I believe it's Rusty. Is this funding, so can this funding be used by libraries?
Yes, if you meet the criteria. I'm not sure which question they're probably asking about the $10 million grant program, I'm guessing. But in any case, you just need to, community anchor institutions like libraries are intended to be able to apply. Again, just got to fit, you have to make it fit within the framework, and the framework is designed to fit within what we can and can't do from the CARES Act and from the Spark task force and the legislation.
Right. Mandy asked, why is an ACH form needed for Surge if it won't be awarded until the project is complete? Mandy, I've got a quick answer on this one. We're working on the ACH form and the financial documentation right now. Once funds are awarded, and then there's the notification to proceed with a project, we will get finalized paperwork, including financial forms at that time. But they're working on the ACH form right now.
Hey, Kayla, let me answer a question. Let me take the question about terrestrial. I see Nick's point about satellite. Let me take that and make sure.
Okay. All right, so Austin asked, low-income program. It asks what type of low-income assistance we currently provide. Do they consider Lifeline?
I believe so. I'm not sure. I want to make sure I answer that correctly. I'll take a look.
Okay. All right, another question about the low-income grant. Is it expected the service would be provided at zero cost to the subscriber or at a discount? And is there a benchmark price?
Well, in the case of existing programs, that's going to be, that's the attractiveness for us to be able to identify what that should look like. So for example, the service provider has a program like Connect to Compete, Internet Essential, et cetera, where they're already able to identify low-income eligibility. they typically offer price points around $10 or $15. Under this program, we would provide the funding for that amount. It wouldn't be a discount. That makes it a little bit more challenging. You've got to make your case. If you don't have an existing program, you're going to need to show us how that is reason. You've got to show the reasonableness. And again, admittedly, we think this is going to be difficult in general under the time constraints that we have, but we want it to be open if there are situations, because we don't know about what all the capabilities are at the different companies. So if you can show us in a way that makes sense that we can get to it, one of the things I meant to say earlier is, in principle, we're looking for ways to say yes, not ways to say no.
So Scott asked a question I think a lot of us want to know the answer to, Stan, so we'll see if you've got it. What if a project is started but unable to be completed by year end?
Yeah, see, that's going to go directly to CARES Act and to the legal department. So you want to be careful not to overpromise and underdeliver. That would be bad. You could, strictly speaking, I think you could end up owing money. Well, I guess the way we've set it up, you're not going to get the money if you don't finish it. That's a principle, a common sense principle. Now, I have heard discussions. I think there was some guidance. The Treasury Department is the owner of guidance, if you will. And I'm not going to try to give interpretations for their guidance. We have the recovery office, the Spark Recovery Office is probably a better place for the answers, strictly speaking. I do know that there was some discussion around exceptions if a project gets started and then there are, for example, supply chain problems. There might be some relief, but what I would say in plain English, project applications must propose projects that can be completed by December 30.
All right, Jennifer asks, is it applicable to the surge grant that you must apply for an exception if your business has already received more than $350,000 in CARES funds? If so, would it be one exception per application area or one exception overall? So Stan, this question is related to our economic development economic development grant eligibility. And I would say, Jennifer, that we will take that back to our team and get an answer for you. Jennifer, if you would go ahead and email the KDC_broadband@ks.gov email and email that question. We will take it back to the team and get an answer for you. And we'll also add that to the FAQ as well. All right, Sharon, do housing authorities qualify for these grants?
Off the top of my head, I hadn't thought about a housing authority. So my answer is probably if you can fit within the framework, that's fine.
Can a county use Spark round one?
I'm sorry, Kayla, I want to make sure I'm being clear because I was trying to think about which program that might be applicable to. And I would just offer the caution. One of the things you've got to be able to do is demonstrate the ability to deliver what you're asking to do, right? So a housing authority needs to be saying they know how to build a network or build the infrastructure, or they need to be able to say they know how to identify. On the other program, they need to be able to show that they have a way of quickly identifying and delivering service for low income, which I can probably see that potentially more than I can see from a lot, just from a, not knowing the details of it, but those are my first thoughts.
Okay. Can a county use Spark One funds to make up its match for an application for the connectivity grant? Jim, this is a question we are going to check with legal and the recovery office on the matching of federal funds. That's what it's related to. So you'll actually see that getting added to our FAQ. All right, Christopher asked, if there is an area that we have two providers, one is cable and one is wireless, but to get internet that meets the minimum 25.3 is not affordable, would that be considered lack of access?
Really good question. I don't think so, because I don't know how you would be able to prove that the affordability actually, yeah, I don't see that. I mean, that's basically, I mean, unless you had a case of just price gouging, you might be able to demonstrate it, but that sounds a little far afield for what we're trying to accomplish. I do get it, but I'm not sure that would fit. But if you want to ask more questions about it and get a more specific answer, I'm happy to.
One opportunity might be with the partnership grant, the Broadband Partnership Adoption Grant. If they have a program or a way to have a program for low income, that might be another opportunity there, especially if it's a matter of affordability. When is the grant award funding provided? Once the project is complete?
When will the funding be provided? I believe in the application it talks about that. I believe it's 80 or 85% at project completion. It's in the FAQs. So let me refer you to that. Yeah.
Somebody just got logged in and asked, where do we find the FCC Form 77 data?
Well, Kayla, I take your point earlier. Kayla and I discussed putting the link to that on our website. And my first reaction was, I'll get to it later. We will put it on our website so you can get it. It's fcc.gov. If you were to do a Google search for Form 477 FCC, it is that notorious of a report. It will pop up right away. But just to make sure that you use the most recent, it's a semi-annual report. So use the most recent one. That's the one we're going by.
To meet the timeline for, pardon me just a second here. Could a nonprofit request funds to purchase computers that would be used for digital literacy training, i.e. using for online job search, to prepare job search documents, to access online training opportunities, and for specialized training like coding?
Devices are okay, but you've got to show the link to solving a connectivity issue. That one, that's a good question. Let me take that one and we'll put an answer on, because I've gotten a lot of questions about devices, and we are trying to figure out, we recognize that's a real issue. So we're trying to figure out a way, if there's a way that we can make that eligible under the partnership adoption program, we're gonna try to do that. I don't know. I need to give you a fuller, a specific answer though.
So we'll get that added to the FAQs. Christy asked, will the application be made publicly available so that current providers can confirm there are no applications overbuilding their currently served areas?
So another great question. As for what's going to be made public, I believe there may be some applications may include confidential information. I don't know. So I think I'm going to halfway punt on the answer to that question. I think the second part of your question was, so there was a would it be made public, which I will get the firmer answer on. And then what was the second part of the question? Sorry.
Asking if the applications would be made public so that current providers could
Yes.
confirm that there were no applications overbuilding currently served areas.
Right. So that really is that's a great question. I meant to speak a little bit more at length on it, so let me do that now. This infrastructure grant program specifically is not going to be able to do overbuilding. We don't want to provide funding where there service does exist. So applicants need to show that there isn't service there, or there isn't service in the case of residential of 25.3 or better. What we will do is for the applicants, before they can be awarded, we're going to do a due diligence look at the areas proposed. For example, if it's showed as served on the form 477, but you provided evidence that said, no, it's really not served in some of that because of the census block and whatnot, we will most likely take steps to determine what the reality is. And that would include reaching out to the service provider indicated as showing that if the service provider that's being shown as offering service where you perhaps are saying that it's not. So we would ask them and they would be able to respond. So that we don't overbuild.
Would you please clarify what the contract period for reimbursement of eligible costs is? So this question relates to an earlier question. I think eligibility for costs, that is in our FAQ, and we will make sure that it is in there too. So if you haven't seen that question on the FAQ, it is there about eligible costs. Does the contract period begin when the grant is awarded or when the application is submitted?
Yeah, that's what was the wording on that before I give a quick answer?
Does the contract period begin when the grant is awarded or when the application is submitted? It would be when the grant is awarded and
yes.
Notice to proceed.
And there's not that's period.
And we'll make sure we add that one to the FAQ as well. Are there any reporting requirements for these programs? And if so, do you have them somewhere, or I guess what platform will be used?
Yeah, so reporting is another great question. We are receiving guidance in real time about reporting requirements. That's why I didn't really spend much time on it, because we have not gotten all of the federal guidelines nailed down for reporting requirements. So that's going to have to be something that we put on our FAQs. But it is an important question because there really will be, my experience with federal funding, there will definitely be reporting requirements.
If there is enough community support to contradict that 25.3 is available, will there be the opportunity for the local service provider to rebut?
Yeah, I think so. If you're proposing what all it is, I think it refer back to my earlier answer, right? So if we see an area that is proposed, if you tell us that's what the situation is, we would most likely, you'd have to be saying that there's not service, it's not adequate, it doesn't meet the 25.3 in the household example. And then we would simply verify that. If there's a provider that says they do, and you're saying they don't, we will simply make a determination. And when in doubt, like I said, we are limited in how sophisticated we can be on such questions. So if it's our best determination, and we will consult with we have a consulting engineering firm that may be able to do some field verification, but I want to caution against questionable service, because if I've got two applications and one of them is clearly unserved and one of them is, well, it might be served, it might not. It's a contest between two providers arguing over some technicality that's way beyond what I can get resolved factually in the time period involved. You kind of know how that's going to go.
All right, so Ben asked the question, obviously the challenge of serving with wireless is that it can move to areas with existing 25 megabits per second service, thereby overbuilding. Is that still permissible?
I might not have caught the full question there.
Go back down, Jim, please. Obviously, the challenge of serving with wireless is that it can move to areas with existing 25 megabits per second service, thereby overbuilding.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's, I think I think I would have to defer to our technical feasibility to make a determination. What we would want is applicants to outline what they're offering. You know, I don't know how to answer that. That gets into kind of how far does a wireless signal go, and reliability, consistency, things that I don't know how to answer other than to consult folks who do.
Okay. All right, and Kevin, we didn't purposely skip over your question, but we're back up where we are. The application requires that projects must serve geographies with a significant number of premises lacking access to terrestrial-based, minimally adequate internet connectivity. What constitutes significant?
We left that open on purpose. You need to plot what the application needs to show is that a need is being met, and we are looking for impact. So we were going to define that, but we're not. We want applications that are considered and recognize the geographies involved. So we're leaving that to your ability as applicants to make the case that we should be funding something that is unserved.
All right, and Christy asked a really good question too, Stan. If a company if a company is using previously purchased materials and supplies from their existing inventory, would these costs be eligible for grant recovery?
I will check. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna agree with you. I think we need to check on that if that's.
But I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, I think so too. But we'll get a for sure answer on that, Christy, and we'll make sure we post that on the FAQ. All right, can you confirm when the first applications will be reviewed and how long will it take for them to be reviewed?
We don't have, it's going to be a very challenging process for us to get them all done. So I don't have the dates in front of me, but I did mention the target award date, and I also mentioned the date that the application window will close for the grant, the infrastructure part of the grants.
So for the connectivity, which is specifically the broadband, the surge, the broadband physical assets, those are going to be, the deadline is August 27th at 2 p.m. And then we will begin the threshold review and then the reviewing and rating by the committee and technical evaluation. Our goal for awarding publicly is going to be September 15th. Again, all tentative dates, and those are goals to try to meet that tight timeline. As you mentioned, school districts have National School Lunch Program eligibility. We are desperately trying to provide connectivity options for our students. Could we apply to purchase or provide cellular hotspots?
I'm sorry, Kayla, could you ask that one again?
As you mentioned, school districts have the National School Lunch Program eligibility. We are desperately trying to provide connectivity options for our students. Could we apply to purchase cellular hotspots?
Strictly speaking, I believe you could. You might want to reach out and maybe ask us, maybe ask a more specific question. I'm happy to look at that. This will be under the adoption piece of the program.
So
Question.
Phil Elliott, you asked that question. Would you go ahead and send that in an email and maybe provide some more information so we can give you a more complete answer?
Yeah.
And then Christy asked when the budget template will be available. Christy, I actually got your email this morning and let our marketing department know that the link to that budget spreadsheet was broken, and they were working on that. So hopefully today, but thank you for bringing that to our attention. Second part, under the current internet service provider section, it asks for the type of service twice. What should be included in the second type of service box? That might be an accident, Christy. We'll look into that as well. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, folks. I think that we're done for now, and we're going to go ahead and shut this down for now. But like we said, if you've got more questions, please email those to the kdc_broadband@ks.gov. Rachel has dropped that link in the chat. So if you've got more questions, please reach out to us that way. We really, really appreciate everybody's time today. Stan, thank you so much. And just let us know if you guys have any more questions. Again, one more reminder, the application deadline is the 27th of August at 2 p.m. And if we're gonna have another webinar, possibly next week, we'll have that information on our website. Anything else, Stan?
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Hopefully this was helpful. We are excited about it. It's not been a relaxed period, but we are really happy that we're able to push this funding out because we recognize, particularly in the rural areas, there's a real issue and real need. So we just wish that it wasn't a December 30 timeline, because we think we could make more benefit more people for the long term if we had, if you all had more time to do the deployments for that robust connectivity I was talking about. But we're gonna get as many as we can done. So thanks a lot.
Thank you all. Have a great day.